Darkness swallowed them all. Empty corridors stretched, lit by flickering fluorescence. Shadows twisted, mimicking life where none existed. The air hung heavy, thick with the silence of 1,000 unsaid words, a place of commerce by day, now a tomb of steel and glass. 4 figures huddled in the security office, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of monitors. The room was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the occasional beep from the security systems and the soft hum of the air conditioning. Each of them had their own story, their own reason for being there on this particular night. Max, the seasoned veteran, tapped a cigarette from his pack. He had been in the security business for over 20 years, having seen it all, from petty thefts to major break-ins. His eyes, though tired, still held a sharpness that spoke of his experience. Max was the kind of guy who could tell you a story for every scar he had, and he had plenty. Tonight, however, even he felt a sense of unease. Sarah, a single mother working extra shifts, nervously chewed her lip. She had taken this job to make ends meet, to provide a better life for her young son. The night shifts were tough, but she was tougher. Still, the weight of responsibility often bore down on her, making her anxious. She glanced at the clock, counting down the hours until she could go home and see her child. But tonight, something felt off, and her anxiety was more pronounced than usual. Ben, a college student on his first job, fidgeted with his keys. He was studying criminal justice and saw this job as a stepping stone to his future career. The reality of the night shift was far different from what he had imagined. The quiet, the darkness, the sense of isolation. It was all new to him. He tried to focus, to remember his training, but his nerves got the better of him. He looked around, hoping to draw some confidence from his more experienced colleagues. And then there was Emily, the quiet one, her eyes constantly scanning the camera feeds. Emily was a mystery to most of her colleagues. She rarely spoke, but when she did, it was always something insightful. She had a knack for noticing things that others missed, a skill that made her invaluable in this line of work. Tonight, her eyes darted from screen to screen, her mind processing every detail. She sensed that something was different, something was coming. Tonight, the air crackled with anticipation. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The team could feel it, a palpable tension that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. They had been through many nights together, but this one felt different. They were the new guard, a mix of experience and fresh eyes, and they were about to face a challenge that would test them all. The night was just beginning and none of them knew what it would bring. The walkie-talkie crackled, breaking the silence of the night shift. The static noise was a familiar sound, one that both comforted and unnerved the guards. It was a reminder that they were not alone, yet it also hinted at the unknown lurking in the shadows. "All clear on level 1, came the voice through the device, a routine check-in that had become second nature to them. The empty corridors of the mall stretched out like a labyrinth, each corner a potential hiding spot for trouble. Max grunted, his eyes glued to the monitor. The flickering screens displayed various angles of the mall, each one showing nothing but emptiness. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from the other side of the lens. They always started on the top floor, working their way down. It was a methodical process, one that ensured every inch of the mall was covered. The top floor, with its wide-open spaces and deserted storefronts, always felt the most eerie. A pointless ritual in this ghost town, Max thought. The mall had been closed for months, yet the security team continued their rounds as if the place was still bustling with shoppers. It was a strange kind of duty, one that felt both necessary and absurd. Ben's footsteps echoed in the cavernous halls, each step amplifying the silence. The sound was almost hypnotic, a steady rhythm that filled the empty space. He tried to focus on the task at hand, but his mind kept wandering to the stories he'd heard about the mall. He shivered, pulling his jacket tighter. The temperature always seemed to drop at night, the cold seeping into his bones. It was as if the mall itself was alive, breathing out a chill that wrapped around him like a ghostly embrace. Something felt off, the air thicker than usual, the shadows deeper. Ben couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was lurking just out of sight. He quickened his pace, eager to finish his rounds and return to the safety of the security office. A soft whisper, barely audible, sent chills down Sarah's spine. She had always been sensitive to the supernatural, but this was different. The whisper seemed to carry a message, a warning perhaps that she couldn't quite decipher. It was as if the very air around her had turned cold, wrapping her in an invisible shroud of dread. She glanced around, trying to locate the source of the whisper, but the store was empty, save for the mannequins dressed in tiny clothes. The silence was deafening, amplifying her fear. She stopped, her hand hovering over the doorknob of a children's clothing store. The store had been closed for years, ever since the tragic incident that no one in town liked to talk about. Sarah had heard the stories, of course, but she never believed them, until now. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the doorknob, the cold metal sending a shiver up her arm. She hesitated, her mind racing with thoughts of what might be waiting for her on the other side. Her breath caught in her throat, she could feel her heart pounding, each beat echoing in her ears like a drum. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but the fear was overwhelming. She had to know what was inside, what was causing these whispers and shadows. With a final shaky breath, she turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. There it was again, a child's giggle, faint and fleeting. It echoed through the empty aisles, sending a fresh wave of terror through her. The store was just as she remembered it, rows of tiny clothes hanging neatly on racks, but now it felt different. The air was thick with an eerie presence, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. She could almost see the outline of a child, just out of the corner of her eye. But when she turned to look, there was nothing there. She strained to listen, her heart pounding against her ribs. The giggle came again, closer this time, and she could feel the presence of something watching her. She wanted to run, to get out of the store and never look back, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. She had to find out what was happening, even if it meant facing her worst fears. She took a tentative step forward, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her bones, a deep, unsettling sense that she was not alone. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and she could almost make out words now. They seemed to be calling her name, beckoning her deeper into the store. She swallowed hard, her mouth dry with fear, and took another step forward. Whatever was in the store, it wanted her to find it. And she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Emily's eyes darted across the monitors, her gaze drawn to a flickering image. A mannequin, its plastic face frozen in a grotesque smile, seemed to be moving. She rewound the footage, her brow furrowing in concentration. There it was again, a subtle shift, a turn of the head. Impossible. Mannequins didn't move, did they? An alarm shrieked through the silence, jolting Max awake. He grabbed the walkie-talkie, his voice gruff. "What's the situation?" "Static." Then Ben's panicked voice. "Security breach, level 3, I repeat, security breach." The line went dead. Max cursed, his gut twisting with a premonition of dread. Something was terribly wrong. Drawn by an unseen force, Sarah found herself in front of an old, boarded-up arcade. Memories flooded back, vivid and terrifying. She remembered the screams, the blinding lights, the feeling of her small hand being ripped from her father's grasp. This was the place where her childhood had ended. Ben sprinted down the darkened corridor, his lungs burning. The air grew colder, the shadows more menacing. He could hear it now, the heavy thud of footsteps closing in. He risked a glance over his shoulder. A towering figure, shrouded in darkness, emerged from the shadows. There was nowhere left to run. Max found Emily by the service entrance, her eyes wide with fear. "It's her!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The woman from the photo!" Max felt a chill run down his spine. The legend was true. The mall was haunted by the spirit of a woman who had lost her child, forever searching for her lost daughter. And tonight, they were her prey.